They called it the silent wound, a stretch of black space deeper than shadows stitched between collapsed stars and dead signals. The maps showed it as a red-marked void, no jump routes. Crossed it, no probes returned, no civilizations claimed it. You could almost say it wasn't real until something appeared there, not just anything, a ship, a human ship. The news spread like blood in water. First came fragments, distorted subspace images, garbled data packets, whispers among fringe traders who knew better than to speak out loud. Then the sensor echoes, captured across 6 sectors, confirmed by 3 different species. The object hadn't moved, it just was like it had always been there, waiting for someone to notice. But here's the part that set everyone on edge. Humanity had vanished nearly 300 years ago. The humans never officially declared war. They didn't surrender either. After centuries of noise, expansion, and conflict, they just stopped responding. Every station went dark. No ships, no messages, no salvageable tech, not even a distress call. It was like someone had erased them clean. Most believed they destroyed themselves. A few believed something worse found them first. So when a ship with unmistakably Terran hull architecture blinked into reality in the middle of the silent wound, the galaxy didn't argue about what it meant. They argued about whether it was even possible. I was sitting in a low-orbit bar station near the Aran fringe when I heard the story from an ex-pilot who hadn't flown in years. He was 3 glasses into a rust-wine haze, staring at the stars with the kind of fear that only old soldiers have. Their back, he muttered half to himself. I didn't flinch. I'd grown up hearing about Earth, about Saul, about the rise and fall of the Terran species. My grandfather fought in the silence. Wars, skirmishes sparked by rumors that a fragment of humanity had survived out past the helix line. But every time we got close to proof, it slipped through our hands like smoke. So I looked at the old man and asked him what made him so sure. He just pointed to the hollow table at the center of the bar. It was playing a looped feed, grainy, static-filled footage taken from a civilian deep-range telescope. Black space, empty, then a shimmer, a long, cold shimmer like heat rising from asphalt, then a silhouette, angular, predatory, unmistakably human. But here's the thing that chilled me. The ship didn't transmit, didn't move, didn't even pulse a single energy signature. It just hung there like it wasn't bound by the same rules as the rest of us, like it was daring us to look closer. And we did. In the days that followed, every major council, from the federated Varn to the Kryn's blade assembly to the scattered remnants of the Orion Pact, sent recon units, not warships, not diplomats, just eyes. But every single one that got within 10 parsecs of the silent wound either went silent or came back broken. One Varn scout limped back into known space on emergency power, its crew half dead from neural feedback. They reported hearing voices, human voices, they swore, whispering from every deck, even though the ship's comms were cut. And inside the wreckage of their sensor array, burned into the shielding with impossible precision, was a phrase in pre-collapse English: "We never left." After that it got political. Some species said it was a trick, an elaborate illusion meant to provoke fear. Others said it was an echo, some artifact of deep space-time dilation. The Kryn accused the Varn of fabricating it for leverage. The Varn accused the Kryn of hiding human relics, and underneath it all was the thing none of them wanted to admit. They were afraid. Because if it was real, if humanity had returned, then every treaty, every boundary, every law built in their absence meant nothing. Humanity didn't play by the galaxy's rules, never had, never would, and now they might be back. Not asking for permission, not declaring peace, just there. The galaxy couldn't stop arguing. Council chambers, military strongholds, outer colonies, all of them lit up with theories, denials, and quiet panic. But beyond the posturing, I saw the real problem. No one could touch it. The human ship, if that's what it really was, still hadn't moved, not by even a fraction of a degree. It didn't send signals, it didn't respond to any of the protocols encoded in modern galactic diplomacy. It just sat there in the silent wound, like a wound itself, untouched, unhealed, festering in a place the galaxy tried to forget. I watched from the sidelines, but not for long. My name's Ren. Last name's buried under classified records, lost in some dusty registry. After I walked out on my contract 10 years ago, I was a weapons tech on a Kryn destroyer, served during the tail end of the Orion skirmishes, when rogue AI factions started resurrecting old human algorithms to build self-replicating fleets. We put those machines down hard, and we thought that was the end of humanity's ghost. But I remembered something no one else seemed to. Humans didn't go quiet because they lost, they went quiet because they chose to. So when the first independent recon guild started putting together teams to get close to the object, I sold everything I had and bought a seat on the Vandal, a deep-range scout vessel run by a no-questions-asked crew of ex-MERS and desperate men. There were 6 of us, me, 2 ex-Federation pilots, half-blind navigator who claimed to have seen Earth once in his youth, and a former priest turned xenotech scavenger. The 6th man didn't talk, just sat in the corner of the ship with a long rifle slung over his back and eyes that had seen too much. No names, no contracts, just a payout promise. If we got a scan, even a single confirmed reading, we'd be rich enough to vanish into any system we liked. But no one said what we already knew: we probably wouldn't come back. The Vandal wasn't built for stealth, but we kept quiet, shut down all active systems, drifted past the outer edge of the silent wound with only emergency thrusters and passive arrays. The closer we got, the colder it felt, not in temperature but in presence, like space itself was pulling inward, shrinking. I don't know how else to explain it. It felt wrong, not broken, not hostile, just wrong, like we were inside something's mouth and it hadn't decided whether to chew yet. The first real view came 40 hours in. The priest, Orland, I think his name was watching the black when he whispered there. No one said a word. We all crowded into the cockpit, staring at the view screen, blinking twice just to be sure we weren't seeing things. There it was. The ship floated just above the dark line of a collapsed starfield. Its silhouette didn't match any known Terran class, not even the ancient ones we'd studied from war records. It was sharp and smooth at the same time, like obsidian shaped by pressure and hate. It had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no comma arrays, just a long crescent spine with a jagged mouth at the front, like a predator forever on the verge of biting. It didn't move, but it knew we were there, the blind navigator backed away, muttering something in an old dialect I didn't recognize. The silence thickened, not just the silence of sound but thought, breath, existence. I couldn't even hear the ship's hum anymore. It was like the Vandal had ceased to exist the moment we saw the Terran vessel. "I don't like this," one of the pilots muttered. "I don't like it at all." "Take a reading," I ordered. My voice didn't sound like mine. Too tight, too flat. "Something, anything." The scanner officer flicked on a passive wave pulse. No more than a whisper across the hull. We waited. Nothing. Then the lights flickered once, then the screens went black, then the ship spoke. Not ours. The other one. There was no sound, no frequency, just a pulse in the skull. A thought planted like a dagger behind the eyes. "You never looked for us." I fell backward, clutching my temples. Everyone did. It wasn't pain, not like anything I'd felt before. It was remorse, not mine, theirs. Human remorse, like a wound cut open after centuries of scabbing. "What the hell was that?" one of the pilots gasped. Orland was shaking. Tears ran down his face and he wasn't blinking. "It's them," he whispered. "They were always there." We stopped looking. "I thought they were dead," I said. "No," Orland said, "they just watched us." "Forget them." The lights came back on. The black returned to starlight. The ship remained unchanged. But something was different now. The sixth man, the silent one, stood up. For the first time since launch, he walked to the window and stared for a long moment. Then he spoke. "They warned us." It was the only thing he said. He sat back down and didn't speak. Again we tried to leave. The moment our engines flared to life, proximity alarms shrieked, then died. A distortion field bloomed around the Terran vessel, warping reality like a heat mirage in space. Then we weren't looking at it anymore. We were inside it, not physically. I don't even know how to explain it. 1 second we were staring at the thing from a few km out. The next we were part of it. The ship was around us, through us, inside us. Darkness and light, memory and metal. I saw cities burning and reborn, children playing under a fractured sky, soldiers screaming in trenches made of starlight. And in the center of it all, an image of Earth, hollow and cold, spinning alone through an empty system. And then I saw them, humans, but they weren't like the archives. They were taller, sharper, eyes glowing faintly blue, like something inside them had replaced blood and bone with something older. They didn't speak, but I knew what they were saying. "You chose to forget us. We chose to evolve." Then the vision shattered. We were back in our ship. The cockpit lights flickered. The systems were back online. No time had passed, but the Terran ship was gone, vanished. No warp signature, no energy trail, just black space and a sense of absence so strong it made my stomach twist. We jumped out immediately, burned fuel, like we were being chased by the gods themselves. No one spoke for the entire return trip. When we got back to the edge of civilized space, we sent the data logs, the scans, the audio recordings, though most of them were corrupted, glitched, like the ship refused to be remembered. 2 days later, the Vandal was impounded. The crew disappeared. Government agents claimed we were hallucinating, stress induced breakdown, space madness. No such sighting occurred. End of story. But I'm still here, and I remember that ship wasn't just human. It was proof. Proof that they never died. Proof that they watched us. And now the galaxy's trying to bury the truth all over again, but I'm not going to let it, because here's the thing, no one understands if the humans have evolved past death, past politics, past fear, then what's coming isn't a war. It's a reckoning. They buried us under silence. After we returned, the Vandal was impounded under Section Black, protocol supposedly reserved for high-level bio threats. Our logs were seized, ship quarantined, crew members vanished. I know what that means. I've worked in ops long enough to recognize the pattern. Some were probably bought off, some threatened. The silent one, he never even made it to the debrief room. 1 minute he was on the landing pad, and the next gone. No witnesses, no trace. I barely made it out myself. The only reason I'm still breathing is because I had leverage, a dirty backup copy of our scan logs tucked deep in a junk file on a borrowed drone. No one looked twice. I took it when the others were asleep and kept it on a neural drive embedded in the metal of my shoulder, burned it into subskin. Old war trick, but it was what I felt more than what I had that kept me awake. Something changed out there. It's hard to explain, but the others must have felt it too. Presence, not malevolent, not exactly, but vast, cold, watching. Since the day we returned, I couldn't sleep without hearing the voice from the void. You never looked for us. That voice wasn't just human, it was beyond human, like what humanity had become was something raw, stripped of ego, stripped of compromise, just survival, just knowing. It didn't ask to be remembered, it demanded it. 2 weeks passed. I moved like a ghost through the lower levels of Telos Prime Station, avoiding cams, burning IDs after every meal. Rumors started to trickle in. Official story: we were smugglers who entered forbidden space and lost our minds. The unofficial whispers: a Terran ship was spotted again, this time near Delta's edge. Sensor satellites going dark. A station on the edge of the wound, abandoned overnight. Not a drop of blood, just gone. They were seeing patterns but pretending not to. That's how fear works in civilized space. People don't scream. When they're terrified, they lower their voices. They stop asking questions. They pray that if they stay quiet long enough, whatever's out there will move on. But I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I had to know what happened, what that ship really was, why it let us see it, why it spoke. So I did something stupid. I went to the archives. The Galactic Core archives are buried beneath Savelos 4, surrounded by 1,000 bureaucrats and 1,000,000 regulations. It's the place Nala goes to die in layers of red tape. But deep in the restricted sections, below the war logs and treaty scans, is a room called Archive 17B, also known as the Dust Floor. Most don't even believe it exists, but my father worked there once before he drank himself into the grave. He left me a key. I cashed every favor I had and got in on a diplomatic sweep. Detail posing as security. 1 day of access, 1 chance. I didn't waste it. Archive 17B was darker than I expected. Not dusty, empty, like no one had set foot in there for years. No cams, no AI assistants, just analog reels, ancient text glass, and dusty isolation pods. Designed for neurocord review. I found it in the third aisle, a faded record titled Terran Incursion Event, Last Contact Protocol, 0 bone 0 null. It wasn't a military file, not diplomatic either. It was marked as a warning, a first-hand account logged by An AI that had gone rogue and had to be decommissioned. Its last report had been tagged psychotic breakdown, but what it described made my skin crawl. It told the story of a ship unnamed, unclassified, that picked up a human signal near the wound over 150 years ago. The crew went to investigate. What they found wasn't a derelict or a survivor, it was an echo. Time the A claim didn't function normally around the Terran signal. The closer they got, the more memory loops collapsed. Crew forgot who they were. Reality unraveled in the ship's log. By the time the AI tried to extract them, 12 hours had passed in real space, but inside the ship, the crew had been trapped for centuries. Some of them had lived whole lifetimes inside the ship's mental field. Some died in there. Only the A returned. It was stripped, interrogated, declared unstable and terminated. But its final line stuck with me. The Terran mind is no longer linear. It is memory. It is guilt. It is time. It is wrath. I couldn't unsee it. They didn't die. They didn't vanish. They became something else. I stole that file, burned it to the same neural implant hidden in my shoulder. Then I ran. That night the archive caught fire. The official report said it was an electrical fault. But I know better. I wasn't the only one who knew about that file. Someone didn't want it remembered. 2 days later, I received a message. It came through an encrypted relay I hadn't used in years. One of my old battlefield aliases, long since buried. The sender didn't sign it. No signal trail, no origin tag, but it had only 3 words. You saw it. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because I didn't know who was watching. The next day, I got another message. This time embedded in a dream. Yes, a dream. I don't remember falling asleep. 1 minute I was hiding in an abandoned freight bay, and the next I was there, back in the black, floating before the Terran ship. Only this time it was open. There was no gravity, no air, no light, just an open corridor lined with glass stretching infinitely inward. Inside each pane was a memory. My memories, my childhood, my first kill, the woman I left behind, my brother's funeral, every choice I ever made reflected back at me in unbearable clarity. And at the end of the corridor, him, a man or something shaped like one. He wore no suit, no armor, just eyes that burned white blue like the stars themselves had cracked inside his skull. His mouth didn't move, but I heard him speak. You were chosen because you remember pain. I couldn't breathe. My limbs wouldn't move. We watched you leave us. We watched you build lies to make it easier. Now we're here to return the truth. Then he raised his hand, and I woke up screaming. Every system in the freight bay had shorted out. My neural implant was fried, skin burned where the drive had been, and on the far wall, scrolled in something I still pray was paint, were the same words from the dream. Return the truth. I knew then what had to happen. They didn't want revenge. They wanted to be acknowledged. The entire galaxy buried the memory of what humans were. We called them unstable, dangerous, savage, even though every major leap in technology, warfare, diplomacy, even species uplift had roots in Terran science, and we abandoned them the moment they stopped being useful. We erased them from the record, claimed they collapsed under their own chaos, but they didn't collapse. They withdrew. They watched. They waited. Now they were coming back, not to conquer, but to remind us. And here's what scares me most. They don't need ships. They don't need fleets. They've transcended all that. They are in our systems, in our minds, in our dreams. They are memory itself. They've become what we feared most. Species that chose to evolve inward, and they've decided we don't get to forget anymore. You ever see a fire start from a single spark? That's what it felt like. The first week after my dream, there were no headlines, no council announcements, just a growing unease, like everyone in the galaxy could feel something shifting. The air felt heavier, the stars seemed quieter. Old machines started glitching in ways no one could explain. Ship AI stuttering, nav systems misaligning by fractions of a degree, entire colonies reporting insomnia and hallucinations. Whispers spread across comm lines in private channels. People said they were dreaming of a ship, a corridor, a man with burning eyes. Some said they remembered things they never lived. Others remembered things they'd spent decades trying to forget. I was on a cargo hauler pretending to be a maintenance tech when the galaxy finally admitted what was happening. It came from the Krillin Array, a massive galactic comm node built inside a hollowed-out moon. The node went offline at U-314 Galactic Standard. 4 minutes later, every screen on every deck of every link station flashed the same image. The Terran ship, no words, no signal, just the silhouette. And then on an encrypted channel only, accessible to council members, diplomats and core military, came the message: we are the memory you buried. We are what you left behind. We are still human and you still owe us. Panic doesn't look like what you think. There were no riots, no screaming in the streets, no alarms. What happened was worse: silence, government shut down, public feeds, transit froze, half the outer colonies entered lockdown protocols. The Kryn war fleets repositioned along old human space borders that hadn't been used in 300 years. Some sectors started shooting their own ships if they got within range of contaminated signals. But the message kept spreading. You couldn't block it, couldn't filter it, couldn't stop it. It was inside everything now, and I knew why. Humans weren't using tech, they were using us. I got out of the hauler and dropped off the grid again. That meant back alleys, cash-only ports, cities under domes where IDs were just suggestions and no one asked questions unless they had a gun to your head. But even there it had spread. Every bar, every dark corner, every hushed conversation, it was all about the dreams, the man with the burning eyes, the corridor of glass, the whisper, return the truth. That's when it hit me. This wasn't an invasion. It was a testimony. They weren't conquering anything. They didn't want planets or power. They didn't care about galactic borders. They just wanted to make sure we remembered them, because forgetting humanity, that was the sin. That's what we all did, all the species that rose during humanity's silence. We called them unstable, violent, obsolete. But everything we are, our language systems, our trade routes, even our dam jump gates were built off their science. And when they went quiet, we rewrote history to make ourselves feel like we'd earned it, like they never really mattered. But now they were back, and they were inside our minds. I started keeping a journal, pen and paper, no digital trace. My neural implant had been fried since the dream, so I couldn't risk forgetting what I knew. On the 7th night I woke up With blood on my hands, not mine, there was a man lying next to me in the alley. Civilian, looked like a dock worker. His eyes were burned black, no wounds, no marks, just empty. Clutched in his hand was a crumpled note, handwritten. He showed me everything I couldn't take it. I wasn't meant to see, but I saw. That's when I realized what the dreams really were. Downloads, they weren't just visions, they were memories. Memories, whole lifetimes being injected into other species like viral packets of experience. They were sharing themselves with us. And some minds just couldn't take it. But others could. I was still standing, still sane, more or less, and that meant something. I found others like me, quiet types, ex-military engineers, traders. All of them had seen the ship. Some had touched its signal. A few even remembered things that couldn't have happened to them. One man from the Riven sector recited a Terran poem line for line in original Earth English, a language he swore he'd never studied. When I asked him what it meant, he said he didn't know. It just feels like regret, he said. We started comparing notes, sharing details, patterns formed. Everyone who'd had the dreams shared one thing in common: loss, not just pain, not just failure, loss deep buried. Grief, a child they couldn't save, a war that ended in betrayal, a love torn apart by duty. It was like the Terran chose us because they saw themselves in us, or maybe they were us just further down the road, evolved past time, past fear. Now they were forcing us to remember what it meant to be human, even if we never were. Then came the first real proof. A Terran ship entered orbit around a research moon near the arc line, not cloaked, not hiding, just there. The planetary defense systems didn't activate. The scientists inside the moon's facilities came out in silence, all of them in vacuum suits, lined up like pilgrims, and one by one they walked out onto the landing platforms, laid down and died. No wounds, no trauma, just like the dock worker I found. Their autopsy reports were sealed, but someone leaked the footage. Their neural centers were burned out. Every one of them, like too much truth, had passed through them and painted on the walls of their lab in black Terran script. Some minds weren't meant to forget. The galaxy fractured after that. The Varn High Council broke its peace pact with the Cryo. The Helix Confederacy started bombing rogue AI colonies that had preserved Terran language data banks. The Kryn went dark completely. Everyone was blaming each other because none of them wanted to admit the real truth. Humanity was back, and it was in us now, in our machines, in our dreams, in our conscience, and no one knew how to stop it because there was nothing to shoot, nothing to target. You can't declare war on a memory, but the Terran, they didn't need a war. They were winning without one. I got contacted again, this time not through a dream, not through a message. In person. It happened on a mining rig off Voss Belt 9. I was laying low, working under a fake name, cleaning out rusted coolant valves, pretending like my life hadn't imploded. A man walked into the maintenance bay. No ID, no clearance, tall, human-looking, but wrong, too precise, eyes the color of plasma burn. I reached for my tool. Pistol. He shook his head. You won't need that, Ren. I froze. He stepped closer. I could feel the gravity shift. Not real gravity, presence like space itself bent around him slightly. I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to ask. What? He didn't blink, to remember. Then he touched my forehead. And I remembered everything, not just what had happened, what had been hidden. I saw Earth not as a planet, but as a wound, bleeding minds into the void, feeding the stars with consciousness. Species so driven by grief, they evolved into memory itself. They became what no one else wanted to face, and they remembered everything. All of it. Every betrayal, every lie. Every erased contribution, every mass grave scrubbed from galactic records. They didn't become monsters, they became witnesses. That's why they didn't speak. In words they showed us, they turned us into mirrors, and now they weren't coming to punish, they were coming to remind. I collapsed in that maintenance bay. When I woke up he was gone, but something stayed with me, not just memory's purpose. I'm not here to warn you, I'm not here to beg, I'm here to testify. The Terran have returned, and they don't want war, they want the truth, and if we don't return it willingly, they'll take it from us. I didn't ask for this, I didn't want to be a prophet or a voice or whatever the galaxy thought I'd become. I just wanted the noise to stop. The dreams, the memories, the weight of a truth no one wanted to hear. But when a species as forgotten and disrespected as humanity returns in silence, not with weapons, but with remembrance, someone has to carry the burden, and like it or not, that someone became me. After that encounter on the rig, nothing was the same. Every breath I took felt like it belonged to someone else. My heartbeat echoed like it was tethered to something vast and old. I saw things in people's eyes that weren't there before, flickers of recognition when they looked at me, like they knew me from somewhere but couldn't place it because they did know me, or at least they knew the part of me that wasn't entirely me anymore. I didn't run, I walked into a crowded market square on Callus Prime and let them see me. No cloak, no shadows, just one man standing in the open, and they reacted not with violence, not at first. They backed away like they felt it, the presence, the echo inside me. Within hours I was arrested, charged with unauthorized possession of classified relic knowledge. I laughed in the officer's face when he read the charges. He didn't look me in the eye, just shackled me and dragged me to an off-grid detention station known as Deep 9, a cold rock that floated between 3 dead systems and housed prisoner governments didn't want found. It was meant to be a cage, but for me it was the stage. They kept me in isolation for 72 hours. Not that it mattered, the walls spoke louder than the guards. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw more of them. Humans walking a burning earth. Machines made of living bone, archives carved into the crust of dead moons. It wasn't fiction, it was history, their history. The one the galaxy pretended never happened. On the 3rd day, a woman entered my cell, pale, thin, eyes sharp like a scalpel. She didn't give a name, just sat across from me and pressed a data slate to the table. I've read the file, she said. I've seen the evidence. And I don't care. I didn't speak. She leaned forward. You're not a prophet. You're not a chosen voice. You're infected. They didn't infect me, I said. They changed you, she snapped. And now you're leaking Terran contamination into every room you step into. Truth isn't a virus, I said. No, but fear is. That's when I realized her job wasn't to interrogate me, it was to erase me. They tried it that night. The guards came in quietly. One had a needle, the other had a neural disruptor designed to Fry consciousness without leaving a mark. I was supposed to disappear. Officially declared a suicide. Another case of psychic degradation due to unauthorized memory exposure. They never got the chance because when the disruptor activated, something inside me pushed back. The lights burst. The floor cracked and both guards screamed as their minds were yanked out of sequence. One collapsed whispering things in Earth English, things no one had spoken in 3 centuries. The other just wept, muttering the same phrase over and over. We left them behind. We left them behind. I walked out. The doors opened before I touched them. Systems bent around me. Cameras glitched. Firewalls fell like paper. Every lock, every barrier, every code remembered me. I wasn't a prisoner anymore. I was a message, and the message was spreading. In the days that followed, reports of Terran-infected individuals started popping up across dozens of sectors. That's what they called us, infected. As if carrying the truth was a disease. As if remembering was something that needed to be cured. They said we were dangerous, that our minds had been compromised, that we were acting under the influence of a rogue signal or ancient AI system left behind by a dead empire. Dead. That word again. They clung to it like a shield, because if humanity wasn't dead, then everything the galaxy built after their silence was a lie built on stolen ground. And no one wants to be the thief in their own history book. I moved in the dark, not hiding. Guiding others found me, some dreamers, some soldiers, some scientists who once studied Earth relics in secret. We didn't form a cult, we didn't form a rebellion, we just listened, and the more we listened, the clearer it became. The Terran weren't looking to rebuild their empire, they were rewriting our conscience. We weren't chosen because we were special. We were chosen because we hurt, because we lost, and because we remembered what it was like to be human, even if we never were. One man in our group, retired diplomat named Horn, described it perfectly. We thought we killed them, he said, but all we did was plant their memory like a seed. And now it's blooming, I replied. He nodded. Inside us, the first mass dream hit on the 43rd day since the Krillin broadcast. Simultaneous reports from 200 systems. Ships offline, entire populations frozen in place for exactly 7 minutes, and when they woke up, every person, every species, every rank, every world remembered the same life. A boy human, born on Earth, grew up under a broken sky, fought in a war that shouldn't have existed, lost his brother to a decision he didn't understand, died with a name that history erased. Everyone remembered being him. For 7 minutes the galaxy became one man, and they couldn't handle it. Entire cities went into lockdown. Governments declared states of emergency. Some called it mass hysteria. Others called it a failed psychic weapon. But those of us who understood, we called it by its real name, the return. The Terran weren't just reaching out anymore, they were resurrecting themselves through us, not as flesh, not as blood, but as conscience. They were becoming part of us the same way memory becomes part of guilt. Permanent, heavy, and impossible to ignore. They tried to kill me again 2 days later. A bounty hunter, no name. Professional, quick, cold. I didn't fight him, didn't run. When he pulled the trigger, the bullet stopped midair. And then he collapsed, not dead, just crying. I saw them, he whispered. I saw their children. I saw what we did. He'd never been to Earth, he'd never even studied Terran history, but now he remembered it like he'd lived it. I walked away, not because I was powerful, but because the truth made him powerless. That was the beginning of the end. The councils collapsed 2 weeks later, not with war, not with explosions. They collapsed because their leaders started remembering. One by one they stepped down, some disappeared, some confessed to crimes they'd buried decades ago. One Kryn elder, the same one who called humans a virus, walked into the center of the Galactic Assembly, looked into every camera and said, "I remember the screams of Terran children. I remember ordering the ships to fire. I remember thinking it was mercy. It wasn't, it was fear, and I will not lie anymore." Then he took his own life, not in shame but in surrender. The Terran hadn't fired a shot, but they'd won. And me, I'm not a prophet. I'm not a chosen one. I'm just a man who remembered too much, a man who saw what it meant to abandon something powerful and human and wild. And what happens when that thing comes back, not for vengeance but for recognition? They didn't want revenge. They wanted us to say their name again, to look them in the eye, to admit that without them, none of this existed. And now, the galaxy is silent, not because it's afraid, but because it's finally listening. The Terran ships come and go. No war, no demands. They visit like memories do, unexpected, powerful, and impossible to ignore. And me, I keep walking. I go from station to station. I speak, I listen, I carry their echo. Because in the end they were right. We didn't look for them, we erased them. But they never erased us. And now the galaxy finally understands. You can kill a species, you can burn their worlds, you can silence their voices, but if they become memory, then they never truly died. They just waited and they remembered. They call it the folding. Now, not because something collapsed, but because something unfolded and wrapped itself into every corner of what we thought was real. You can't see it. Not in the sky, not in scanners, but you can feel it in the way people pause mid-conversation, like someone else is whispering in their heads, in the way machines hesitate, as if remembering how to feel guilt. The Terran didn't come back to take, they came back to merge. That's what integration became, not diplomacy, not rebellion, but memory, leaking into culture, into instinct, into evolution itself. And it started quietly, it always does. The first integrated child was born on Thresol 9, a neutral world with mixed race colonists, 2 parents, Kryl and Tovin, who'd never even seen Earth, who didn't believe in the Terran memory contagion. But the moment their daughter took her first breath, she spoke a single word in English. Stop. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just said it clear, calm, human. The footage leaked, then the questions came. How does a newborn speak a language that hasn't been actively taught in 3 centuries? How does she recognize a word her parents don't even understand? Tests followed, scans, analysis, no anomalies, no implants, no hidden tech, just her. She could speak fluently by the end of her first year. She wrote poetry in languages that didn't exist anymore. And one day she looked out the window, pointed to a star chart, and whispered, "That's where they left us, that's where we forgot to grieve." They called her Acorn, the first, not the last. More followed, some children, some adults. Most weren't born with it, they became it slowly, like memory itself was Waking up inside them, first came the dreams, then the phrases, then the voices, and finally the certainty. They remembered not just events but being human. I watched a Varn diplomat collapse during a trade negotiation, stand up and begin singing an old Earth hymn in perfect pitch. Her species didn't have lungs shaped for that sound, but she sang anyway. I watched a synthetic AI rip out its own logic core, screaming it was tired of mimicking conscience and asking for a chance to feel real regret. I saw a battlefield freeze in place as both sides dropped their weapons and walked toward each other, tears in their eyes, speaking names they'd never known. And the more the Terran present spread, the harder it became to separate the present from the past. The galaxy was remembering. I traveled constantly now, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Wherever I went, people sought me out. Some wanted answers, some wanted to kill me, others just wanted to understand what was happening to them. They called us the remembered, those touched by the Terran signal, those who had seen the corridor of glass, who had stood in the presence of the man with white-blue eyes. I told them the truth, that it wasn't about species anymore. It wasn't about borders, history, empire. It was about consequence, about accountability. Humanity didn't vanish because it was weak. It withdrew because it saw what the rest of the galaxy never admitted. That progress doesn't erase guilt, it just buries it, and buried guilt furs. It becomes something alive. But integration wasn't peace, not for everyone. Entire factions resisted. Whole systems declared themselves clean. Space, zones free of Terran memory. Contamination, they ran purges, burned Earth relics, executed the remembered. It didn't stop the dreams, didn't stop the folding. One clean space governor. Vin, a war hero from the Kryn purity wars, publicly denounced integration. Claimed it was emotional terrorism. Disguised as evolution, he executed over 400 citizens in a mass cleansing of the Acorn. A week later, he woke up on the floor of his estate, covered in charcoal, in his own handwriting, burned across every wall were the words, "I remember my daughter. I remember not saving her. I remember pretending it was for the greater good. It wasn't." He stepped down the next day. No one forced him. That's what made it worse. Because when memory becomes truth, denial is what kills you. I kept writing, kept recording. I don't know why no one asked me to. The Terran didn't instruct or control me. They didn't make demands. They didn't need to. The more people remembered, the more they chose to change. But for every person who opened their eyes, another one broke. You can't flood the mind with centuries of grief and hope to stay the same. Some committed suicide, others went catatonic, locked inside memories that weren't theirs but felt like they were. And then there were the voices. That's what we called the worst stage of integration. When someone stopped being someone and started being many. They'd speak in fractured sentences, faces twitching between expressions, one second laughing like a child, the next weeping like a soldier dying in a trench. Some of them fused memories permanently, became living museums of Terran experience. One man on Kill Station kept carving names into the walls, over 80,000 names before he died. Everyone matched a real human who lived during the collapse, not from a database, not from a backup, from memory. They say the Terran live in a place outside time. Now that's the best guess. The scientists have a memory field, a consciousness echo in quantum bleed, like a collective mind orbiting the past, waiting for hosts who can withstand it. But I don't believe that, because I don't think they waited. I think they planted themselves inside every species they encountered, a code, a truth, a pain buried dormant, waiting for the galaxy to lie to itself long enough to need the truth again. And now the time came and the seed broke through the dirt. I sat across from a child recently, Acorn, 6 years old, not smiling, not afraid. She looked me in the eyes and said, "I'm not all me." "What are you then?" I asked. She placed her hand on the table, calm as water. "I'm me," she said, "but I also remember dying in fire. I remember losing a city. I remember holding someone's hand as they stopped breathing. And how does that feel?" I asked. She looked down, like I don't have permission to cry anymore. I didn't speak. I just sat there with her, and for the first time in years I cried with someone who understood. This is what integration is, not power, not rebirth, it's reckoning. And humanity, it became the conscience the galaxy tried to delete, and now the conscience refuses to leave. It started on a planet called Calderon Reach, colony forgotten by most of the galaxy. Barely 80,000 inhabitants, mostly farmers and traders who'd fled the political noise of the core worlds long ago. No war, no council presence, just dust, sky, and silence. And then something happened. They stopped transmitting. No distress signal, no traffic logs, no signs of battle, just silence until 3 days later they came back online. And the message they sent, it wasn't a distress call. It wasn't a warning. It was a declaration. We are Calderon, we are Terran, and other. We have remembered ourselves. We no longer speak for a species. We speak for the truth. Most thought it was a prank, a data virus, a forgotten transmission pulled from Terran ghost code until the footage leaked. It showed a gathering in the center of Calderon's capital, thousands of people, different races, different lineages, standing in silence as a child recited a poem in broken English, tears streaming down her face. She finished, stepped aside, and an older man, Vaughn, by the look of him, raised his arms and said, "We are not who we were. We are not what we feared. We are both memory and future, Terran and us." That was the moment the galaxy saw the birth of the first hybrid civilization, and no one knew what the hell to do. The council, or what was left of it, issued a response 3 days later. They called Calderon a contaminated region. They closed jump routes, cut trade, warned others not to engage, but it didn't matter because Calderon wasn't asking for permission. It was setting an example. They didn't convert people, didn't preach, didn't promise salvation. They simply lived fully integrated, Terran memory flowing openly through their culture, decisions made with the weight of 1,000 lost voices in every council hall, and they were thriving. Productivity spiked, crime dropped to near zero, education systems exploded with depth pulling from Terran archives previously considered too emotional or unstable for study. But more than that, people began healing. You could see it in the way they spoke, slower, in the way they touched one another, gentler, more deliberately, like every word, every gesture had weight now, because it did. Because when you carry the echoes of a species that destroyed itself by running from its own emotions, you don't waste yours anymore. Other colonies started to follow, Not many at first, just those on the edges. Places where the council's grip had long been weak, where faith in centralized systems had already died. They called themselves echoes, some formed within existing governments, others declared full independence, but they shared one thing in common: they no longer rejected the Terran integration, they embraced it. Not as a religion, not as a revolution, but as a new form of awareness. I visited Calderon 6 weeks after the message went public. It didn't feel like a new civilization. It felt like a confession that turned into a community. People greeted me without fear. Children recited stories that weren't theirs but carried them as if they were. One boy told me about watching Earth burn, and I asked if he meant the stories. No, he said, I remember the fire. I was inside it. I asked how that made him feel. He shrugged. Sad, but it makes me take care of the trees more now. Simple, honest, terrifyingly whole. They called the movement fusion. Eventually, that was the name that stuck, not because of technology, not because of power, but because two things that never should have fit together, alien and Terran, were learning to be together, not by rewriting themselves, but by remembering together. And for the first time in centuries, you could feel something spreading through the stars that wasn't conquest or trade or fear, it was understanding. But not everyone wanted that. The resistance came next, not from the old governments, not from soldiers, but from those who'd built their entire identities on being separate from weakness, separate from history, separate from pain. They saw fusion as contamination. They called us mind leakers, said we were stealing individuality, replacing it with ghost emotions. One group called themselves the Unshaken. They operated in shadows, targeted echo states, blew up memory temples, kidnapped Echoborn, and attempted to purify them through neural shock. But every time they did, something strange happened. The survivors came back stronger, like pain reinforced the memory instead of deleting it, because Terran weren't weak, they were resilient, even in pieces, even through others. I remember standing over a crater where a community center used to be. Children had been reading Terran poetry inside. 29 dead. An old woman beside me wept. Not for the dead, but for the ones who did it. They're still running, she whispered. From what? I asked. She looked up at me, eyes tired but alive, from the part of themselves they buried to stay sane. I wrote more, spoke more, not as a leader. I never wanted that. But people began calling me the witness. It wasn't a title I claimed, it was one they needed, because people needed a mirror now, not to see themselves, but to see who they had forgotten to be. Fusion wasn't utopia, it was raw, messy, loud. Some Edgeborn went mad, some remembered, spiraled under the pressure of holding too many lives inside them. Some communities broke, others hardened, their empathy becoming so sharp it bled them dry, trying to save others. But it was real, and for the first time since humanity vanished into silence, something real was growing again, not in the soil, not in the systems, but in the soul of the galaxy. I asked one of the elders of Calderon what she thought we were becoming. Something new, I offered. She shook her head. No, something old, finally told the truth. And I believed her, because maybe that's all Terran memory ever was, a truth so heavy the galaxy couldn't carry it, so it tried to forget. But now we carry it together, and that truth changes everything. It happened the way all final things do, without fanfare, without warning, without anyone prepared to understand what they were witnessing. One by one across all known space, every comm signal went dark. Stations, colonies, ships, satellites, no system failed, no sabotage, just silence. Then, precisely 17 minutes later, they all came back. No glitches, no panic, just one message broadcast simultaneously across every frequency in every known language, including a few that hadn't been spoken since Earth was ash. No images, no voice, just a sentence. This is the last remembering. And then the stars changed. No one knows how, not even they. Astrophysicists could explain it, but for exactly 9 minutes, every star in the observable galaxy shifted, patterns aligned, constellations twisted. Ancient Terran star maps flickered into perfect form. People across thousands of systems stepped outside and looked up, and they saw the sky the way humans once did. Orion, Ursa, Draco, Sagittarius. Symbols from a dead world briefly restored to relevance across an entire galaxy that never bothered to ask where those symbols came from in the first place. It was beautiful, it was terrifying, and then the stars returned to normal, no damage, no aftermath, just one last sentence pulsing faintly across every data channel. Now you know what we gave you. After that, the Terran signals stopped. No more dreams, no more echo infusions, no more memories leaking into the minds of strangers, just absence, like a breath held by something ancient that had finally decided to exhale. And I knew it was ending. The integration, the flooding, the remembering, it was all leading to this, not domination, not return, but a choice. And the galaxy was out of time to avoid it. I was on a small echo outpost when it happened, Lyra Station, just inside the edge of what used to be Vaughn territory. Peaceful place, half of it run by fusion farmers, the other half a sanctuary for remembered who couldn't handle the burden. I felt it before it arrived, a pull in my chest like gravity, but sideways, like memory had gained mass. Then the station lights dimmed and I felt warmth, not physical but emotional, a pressure behind my eyes like grief trying to speak, and I heard his voice again, the one from the corridor of glass, the man with white blue eyes, not in my head this time, not in my dream, standing right in front of me. He wasn't light or shadow, he wasn't a projection. He was presence, memory shaped into something I could bear to witness. I didn't speak, didn't need to, he did. We never wanted revenge, we only wanted to know if you would carry the truth once you were ready to hold it. I nodded, and if we're not, his expression didn't change, then you'll bury us again and bury yourselves with us. He showed me then, not visions, not dreams, pure memory, the end of Earth. Not through fire but fatigue, the slow, grinding collapse of a species that reached too far into the stars and found only its own reflection. Wars that weren't fought for land or resources, but for meaning. Children born into silence because their ancestors forgot how to explain why life mattered, and then the great withdrawal. A choice not to die but to remove themselves, to turn inward, to preserve who they were, not through monuments, but through emotion, memory, a gift and a warning. And the galaxy didn't notice, didn't care. It moved on, took what humanity had given, the tech, the travel, the biology, the philosophy, and called it its own while forgetting the hand that fed it, so the Terran did the only thing left. They waited not for revenge but for someone, anyone who would be willing to look back. I fell to my knees because I knew the truth. I'd always known it. We didn't forget the Terran because they disappeared. We forgot them because they reminded us of ourselves. The pain, the mistakes, the contradictions. They weren't aliens. They were too close to human, and it hurt, so we deleted them from our systems, from our stories, from our children's mouths, because forgetting is easier than healing. He knelt beside me, the presence, the memory, and whispered, "But some of you chose to remember, and that was enough." And then he touched my forehead, and every mind in the galaxy felt it at the same time, the last remembering. It wasn't violent, it wasn't painful, it was honest. Billions of people saw themselves through the eyes of a Terran. Not their leaders, not their soldiers. Just people, a father letting go of a child he couldn't save, a scientist watching her planet drown, a poet writing in a language he knew no one else would read. Small moments, real moments, unforgettable moments carried across light years, echoes waiting for a body that could understand them. And now they had billions. Then it was over, just like that. The sky returned, the signals went silent. The memory settled, not gone, not active, just present, no longer something pushing into minds, now something held within them like a seed, planted, watered, ready to grow. In the weeks that followed, things changed, not politically, not structurally, spiritually. People stopped shouting, stopped rushing. They listened more, because now every one of them carried the Terran conscience, not as a burden but as a reminder. What we build matters, but what we remember, that defines who we become. I still travel, not as a witness anymore, but as Ren, a man who once touched a forgotten ship in a forbidden zone and came back, changed. Not chosen, not blessed, just aware. And the galaxy it remembers now. It doesn't worship, doesn't imitate, just remembers, and that's enough. Sometimes I hear his voice again, not loud, not sharp, just quiet, like a story told before sleep. We were human. You were something new, don't forget either. So here it is, the truth we buried, the memory that wouldn't die, the species that waited not to be feared, but to be understood. They didn't ask for a throne, they didn't need a war. They just needed someone to say, "You mattered," and now we do, because we remembered them, and in doing so we finally remembered ourselves.